Okay, this is a short introduction to the life and writings of Ishikawa Jun. I was asked to write this for a Tokyo Opera, Tokyo National Theater, I think is the name of the theater group that did a opera adaptation of Ishikawa Jun's novella, Shion Monogatari, translated by Donald Keene as Asters in 1965, I think. So I wrote this short introduction to Ishikawa Jun for their pamphlet for the opera, and the opera was listed among the best operas of world operas of 2019, and will probably run again sometime soon. So if you have a chance to see the opera, definitely see it. I'll provide the information and the links in the description to this video. Writing Beyond Realism, the case of Ishikawa Jun. Ishikawa Jun, born in 1899, died in 1987, is a towering figure in modern Japanese literature. Born in Tokyo, he began his literary career as one of Japan's first translators of French literature, introducing the modernist works of André Gide and others to a generation of readers. His debut as a novelist came in 1935 with Kajin, the Fair One, translated by me in my upcoming book, a parody of the so-called I-novel, or Watashi Shōsetsu, mode of autobiographical realism that dominated modern Japanese fiction for the first half of the 20th century. Kajin was followed by a series of similarly experimental works that challenged the norms of naturalistic realism, including Ashide, Read Writing, 1935, Hinkyu Mondo, Dialogue on Poverty, 1935, Hibutsu, Hidden Buddha, 1936, Yamazakura, The Wild Cherry Tree, 1936, translated by me, Maru's no Uta, The Song of Mars, 1938, translated by me, and Fugen, The Bodhisattva, 1936, translated by William Tyler, which won him the second Akutagawa Prize. During the Second World War, Ishikawa buried himself in the study of literature. He wrote a series of important essays on a variety of subjects: Japanese literature of the Edo period, classical Chinese literature, European modernist and symbolist literature, and modern Japanese literature, in order to clarify his own literary orientation and philosophy. As I argue in my forthcoming book, Writing Beyond Realism, a critical study of Ishikawa Jun's early fiction and essays with translations, Ishikawa's entire corpus can be understood as a sustained attack on the notion of mimetic realism, or shajitsugi in Japanese, which he regarded as the dominant paradigm of modern Japanese literature. More than any other modern writer, Ishikawa recognized that the key fault line in the arts is the divide between realist modes and non-realist modes. His two masterpieces of interwar literary criticism are Bungak Taigai, A General Approach to Literature, 1942, a collection of previously published essays dating back to May 1936, and Moriogai, 1941, a critical appraisal of his literary idol Moriogai, published just before the 20th anniversary of his death. Moriogai, of course, is the great writer from the Meiji period. After the war, Ishikawa continued to explore alternatives to conventional realism in his fiction, but unlike his earlier Gide-inspired metafiction, his post-war fiction moved increasingly toward fantasy, allegory, and alternative history. In retrospect, we can see that Ishikawa's attempt to push modern Japanese literature beyond the phase of naive realism was ahead of its time. Today, the novels of Murakami Haruki, Takahashi Genichiro, and so forth, not to mention anime, manga, and other forms of popular culture, all speak to the fact that magical realism, speculative fiction, and other forms of post-realism now constitute the mainstream of Japanese fiction. This trend extends beyond literature. One has to only turn to artists such as Aida Makoto and Murakami Takashi, two famous contemporary artists, to see how the fantasy turn has taken place in the art world as well. Indeed, fantasy seems to occupy the position that once belonged to realism. Perhaps the finest example of Ishikawa's post-war fiction is his allegorical masterpiece Shion Monogatari, published in 1956, which was translated into English by Donald Keene as Asters in 1961. I misspoke earlier. In 1961, Keene's translation came out, inspired by Gustave Flaubert's Les de Saint-Julien le Hospitalier, The Legend of Saint Julian the Hospitalier, in 1877. The story is set in pre-modern times in an age of feudal wars. It obliquely addresses the most urgent concerns of Japanese people at the time: war, trauma, historical amnesia, responsibility, and the problem of evil. The four main characters each represent a different category of evil. Tonai, the rural-born diviner, represents the evil that results from moral corruption and worldly ambition. Princess Utsuro, Muneyori's wife, whose name literally means empty or hollow, is a high-born sex fiend whose evil stems from her unbridled carnality. Yumimaro, Muneyori's uncle, is a vulgar brute whose petty brand of evil is the result of his perverse privileging of his inclinations. And Muneyori, the work's central character, is a nobleman who has a natural genius for poetry but chooses instead to follow his destructive impulses. Muneyori represents a kind of diabolical evil that is non-pathological and exists for its own sake. The work received the Ministry of Education Prize for Literature in 1957 and has been a consistent favorite among Japanese readers. Like so many of Ishikawa's works, Astor's, or Shion Monogatari, abounds in binary oppositions: country and city, poetry and prose, art and politics, self and other, utopia and dystopia, memory and forgetting, eros and thanatos, body and spirit. These binaries often collapse into one another, or they are sublimated into a higher unity. The work's central dichotomy is represented by the two characters Muneyori and Heita, who initially appear to be polar opposites. Heita is a world-renouncing, self-denying hermit who lives in a cave and spends his time sculpting Buddha statues in the mountains. For him and his tribe, history is a nightmare that must be forgotten. He surrounds his cave with memory-blotting wasuregusa, daylilies, which literally means forgetting grasses. By contrast, the ruthless Muneyori seeks to remember his past atrocities by planting wasure nagusa, forget-me-nots, over those he has killed. For him, the traumatic past is something to be preserved and celebrated. In the final climactic scene, the two seemingly antithetical characters are revealed to be uncanny mirror images of one another. Muneyori's final declaration that Heita is myself suggests the unsettling possibility that radical good and radical evil are somehow identical. Prominent literary and art critic Kato Shuichi, who died in 2008, writing in 1968, ranked Ishikawa as Japan's finest post-war writer. Other critics have described Ishikawa as Japan's last bunjin, or wanren in Chinese, a Chinese-derived term that refers to the literati, writers, and artists of the Sino-Japanese tradition who devoted their lives to the pursuit of art. Ishikawa's literary protégés include leading post-war novelist Oe Kenzaburo and Abe Kobo. The latter, in his eulogy for his mentor, ranked Ishikawa as one of the most erudite and encyclopedic minds of Japan, calling him the Jorge Luis Borges of Japan. Other distinguished admirers have included novelists Mishima Yukio and Shibusawa Tatsuhiko. Influential literary and cultural critic Suzuki Sadami aptly summed up Ishikawa's legacy when he wrote, "The world of Ishikawa's novels constitutes the very backbone of the literary arts of the Shōwa period." Alright, that's the end of this video. For more information, you have to wait for my book to come out, and to see the opera, I'll click on the links provided below. Bye-bye.